Welcome to the underlying structures of your life, how to create the best structures for success. I'm Ivan Fritz. I'm the CEO of Creatortools, which is the home of the Creating Your Life online course, which there'll be a little bit more to that later. I'd like to go ahead and introduce Robert Fritz. He's the best-selling author of The Path of Least Resistance. He's a leading thinker in structural dynamics, and his work has influenced fields ranging from organizational leadership and creativity to personal development. And of course, he's also my father, but I'd like to welcome him to this webinar. Welcome, Robert. And I will give this title off. There we go.
Thank you, Ivan, and thanks, everybody. Hi, and welcome to the webinar. Let me describe today's subject matter, which is really the power of structural dynamics and the power of the creative process. And in a way, these are two different fields. One is the study of how structure works. Structure creates structural tendencies. In other words, if you set up certain structures, they'll tend to lead toward other outcomes. And what our work has done is shown that the underlying structure of anything will determine its behavior. So most people in their lives have underlying structures that are invisible to them. Some of those structures are pretty good. They help you create the life you want. Some of those structures are not pretty good. They create what we describe as oscillation. In one structure, the life pattern is advancing. You set out for creating something, you do what it takes to create it, you have it for a while. That then becomes the platform for future success, and that creates momentum in your life, and you can build and build and build as one creation leads to another creation.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
So when you're talking about structure in general, structures in our life, structural organizations, and so on, what do you define as structure? What does that mean?
Well, think about it this way. I'm going to give you an analogy. We have car parts over the shop floor. The parts themselves don't make a car. It's only when we combine them in a single structure that the parts then join together and have impact on each other as a single entity, a single structure. So structure is an entity, one thing, made up of parts that influence each other. So in your life, you have parts that combine, that influence whether your life patterns will be successful or will be oscillating, will have reversals. As I started to say, the other kind of pattern is one in which you set out for something, you do what it takes, you have it for a while, but then there are reversals, and at the end of that story, you no longer have the thing you set out for, and it's not a good ending. And that's called an oscillating pattern because, in fact, it oscillates. Now, the thing about structure in people's lives is that for most often, these structures are invisible. You don't know they're there, you can't see them. And most people don't think structurally, they think situationally. So in my book, The Path of Least Resistance, I describe two major types of orientations. In one orientation, I call it the reactive responsive. And what you do in that orientation, you either react against or respond to the prevailing circumstances of your life. So we could say in that orientation, the driving force are the circumstances in your life, and you can either respond or react against them or respond to them. But it's not very successful in terms of you organizing your life around those things that matter most to you.
So if that's my orientation, then I'm basically just kind of life is happening to me and I'm just choosing what I'm going to do in my life based on the circumstances and responding to them rather than any other force or
Well, it isn't that you don't have desires, visions, things you want, but life will get in the way. It's one way to say it. You know, you're busily going after the thing you want, and suddenly the circumstances were such that he derailed your project. And as a matter of fact, I mean, when we think about how we're raised, we are taught that if you move from reacting against to responding to the circumstances, that's supposed to be progress. In school, you're not supposed to be a rebel. You're supposed to be a good student and cooperate. And it's funny because sometimes being a rebel is actually healthier.
Right.
A rebel with a cause. Um, but in either case, whether you're reacting or responding, it's still the circumstances that are dominant. Now, the other orientation that I describe in the path of least resistance is the creative or the generative. And in this orientation, it's not the circumstances that are the driving force. It is the choices that you make in your life. So, yes, we have circumstances, but the driving force, the organizing principle in that orientation has to do with what you want to create, has to do with choices you make. And when people move from the orientation of the reactive responsive to the orientation of the creative or the generative, there's actually a change of underlying structure that takes place. Now, the orientation of the creative or the generative is the essence of the creative process. And the creative process is not creativity, it's not idea generation. When I wrote my book, Creating, I got on a few creativity conferences, and I found I had nothing in common with the other speakers, none of them were artists, by the way. They were psychologists or neuroscientists, and they were not talking about the creative process. They were talking about idea generation. And pretty much the audience for those conferences were middle managers in companies versus, people who actually are in the creating business. Um, their idea was as simple as children are really creative, so we should get back to that childlike state,
Yeah.
non-judgmental and free associate and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not what professionals do in the arts. They don't free the mind, they focus the mind. And the way you focus the mind is what, in a structure that we describe as structural tension, which is a structure in which you have two data points, the end result you want and current reality as it is in relationship to the outcome you want. So just think about this very simply. This is the desired state. I want this. This is the actual state. Here's where I am. Now that tension, it's not a gap. Sometimes people say it's a gap. No, it's not a gap. A gap is the absence of something. If you want to know what a gap is, Madonna's teeth. Once I was pointing this out to somebody, and I took all these models that had gaps in their teeth. That's a gap. Yeah, the absence of something.
It's a
This is the
space. It's
this is the
nothing there.
presence of tension, which is a force. It's a dynamic. It's an energy. And whenever you have a tension, it will strive for resolution. Now, there's one of two ways you can resolve it. You can either give up your goal, no tension, or you can lie about current reality and you won't have tension. So you got to really be clear, at least clear enough to say, this is what I'm trying to create. Here's where I am. And that motivates action steps. So the dynamic there really begins to sort itself out in terms of whatever actions you need to take to accomplish the outcome you want. It's like
So
an
what
archer stretching the bow, aiming the arrow. With adequate tension, you can hit the target.
so what you're describing though right now is really the advancing structure that we know of to be the most effective, right?
Yeah.
But so what happens in a non-advancing or an oscillating structure? I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, I want things and I have maybe the ability to get them, but I don't know, and I'm not so sure of myself, or I end up
Yeah.
often sabotaging myself. Why does that happen? What am I doing there?
Yeah. What you're doing is it's not something you're doing, first of all. It's a structure you're in. So you're in a rocking chair, and a change of structure is you get out of the rocking chair, you get into a Ferrari. In that structure, there are three elements. In structural tension, there are two data points, two elements. And the structure that oscillates, there are three elements, and the third element are various concepts that you have. Now, we have identified four major concepts that people often have that contribute to their inability to have success be sustainable. And they are identity. And identity, a majority of people in our studies have had identity issues. Now, identity issues are how you define yourself, how you see yourself. So if I'm trying to create something and I have an identity issue, if I'm successful, I'm going to say, oh, look at, I was successful. Or if I fail, I was a failure. Versus I tried to do something and as an experiment, it either worked or didn't work. So people with identity issues always make it about themselves. Now,
So
the
if you
interesting
fail,
thing
then
is,
I failed.
well, yeah, but it's they come by it honestly. I just want to say this is not something they've set out to do. And we come by it honestly because when you're a kid, you're told you're a bad kid if your room is dirty, you're a good kid if you get good grades. Everything is tied to identity when you're a child. And so it's natural to grow up and think that your success or failure is a product of how you see yourself. We have a whole industry that does that, the self-esteem movement.
Yeah.
Self-esteem movement says if you think well about yourself, you'll be okay. But if you don't think well about yourself, you won't be okay. And so you've got to change your opinion. And if you go into bookstores all over the country, you'll see things like love yourself, love yourself posters of different pictures and nice, it's this whole thing. Um, and the fact of the matter is, some people don't love themselves.
And that does that mean that they're going to have a pretty terrible life, or do they have to love themselves in order to
Well,
have a
actually, in
satisfactory
reality, it's
life?
irrelevant whether they love themselves or not. What's and how much do you have to love yourself to want good relationships, interesting work to do, good quality of life, good health. I mean, you want those things no matter what you think about yourself. So Dr. Wayne Anderson and I wrote a book called Identity, and the subtitle of that book is It Doesn't Matter What You Think About Yourself. Now, they did a study at Columbia University where they gave kids in middle school a really easy puzzle to solve. Then they said to half of the group, one sentence, you must be very smart at this. The other half of the group, they didn't say anything to. When it came time to choose the next puzzle, the group that was told, oh, you must be smart at this, chose an easy puzzle, whereas the people who weren't told anything chose a harder puzzle. And they
Interesting.
could see that the disincentive of this focus on themselves was really diminishing their aspirations, their ambition, their sense of challenge. They were trying to make sure that they were okay and could prove that they were smart about this one thing. And there are many studies that have turned out now that positive thinking backfires. I was doing a workshop in Sundance one time, about 300 people in the room, and I'm really bad mouthing positive thinking. And this poor guy gets up. He probably spent a fortune on positive thinking courses. And so he gets up and he says, what's wrong with positive thinking? And my answer was, because it's lying. When do you know for sure something can be accomplished?
After it's over.
After it's done, right? Up to that
Yeah.
point, it's only speculation. Looks likely you'll be able to cross the street, but if you get hit by a bus on the way over. So this insistence that, oh, I can do it, and I have to think well about myself. What it does is it adds a dimension to the structure that creates the success or lack of success of a project as if it were a personal reflection on how you see yourself. Now, here's what happens. You set out for something, you create it, you have it for a while. This is two rubber bands. In one rubber band, it's the you and the outcome. The other rubber band is you and the concept. And this is what I mean by the path of least resistance. It's about where energy finds its easiest to go. So here I am, I've created something, but in the back of my mind, I'm judging myself. I brought my identity into it, and it won't hold up to scrutiny because the concept that drives the identity usually is an unwanted concept. And by the way, if you want to know sometimes what your unwanted ideas about yourself are, look at your ideals, how you're supposed to be. Often the ideals are the opposite of what you actually think.
So that's it's actually interesting you said that. Somebody asked, how can we see the underlying structures in our life? Can we see it ourselves?
Yeah, it sometimes you can see it yourself, um, but you have to think structurally versus situationally.
It's not easy. As somebody who has tried it myself, I would say that it isn't easy because these structures are designed by your brain to kind of hide them from you, so you don't
Exactly.
realize that it's happening, right?
That's
But
right.
what about, I mean, if you tell yourself a story about, say, a time that you accomplished something and kept it versus a time that you accomplished something or didn't accomplish something that you set out for, you
Hmm.
can sort of identify the patterns there, right? If you kind of have the same story.
Maybe. I mean, certainly you can see in your life there are predictable patterns, and you won't see it all at once. But if you begin to think about the different events of your life and you track the actual steps, they're really quite the same. In fact, if people want to see more of that, I have a structural consulting channel where we do full structural consultations with people in which they actually have changes of underlying structure. And many of those structural consultations, I do the person's pattern. And the pattern usually goes like this. Did you do step one? Yes. Did you do step two? Did you do? Great. Okay. Let's think of a different story. Did you do step one? Yes. Did you do step two? Think of a different story? Step one, yes. Step two. And all of those steps are taken in the pattern, completely unknown to the person, even though it can feel kind of familiar. The details are different. One other thing about um, the identity thing, is a structure that I described as the ideal belief reality conflict. Let's say you have an unwanted belief, you're a coward. The ideal you would create is I'm brave. The function of the ideal is to hide the belief from yourself. Now, um, in that structure, you might try to live up to the ideal, do hang gliding, swim with the sharks,
Run into
do
burning buildings.
extreme skiing, all of that. Now, by the way, some people who do that stuff love doing it. They don't have the structure. They just
Right,
love doing that. But some people do have the structure. And the thing is, we call it the boomerang effect. You try to create all these experiences of being brave, but who but a person who thought they were a coward would have to prove they're brave?
right.
Or if they
Yeah.
thought they were stupid, the idea would be to be intelligent. Or they thought,
Prove that they're
they
smart.
were worthless, the idea would be to have worth. Or if they thought they were irrelevant, to be relevant, or they, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I say you can look at your ideals and see perhaps what some of your unwanted beliefs are. And those
So
unwanted beliefs, the usual approach in self-help has been try to change your belief. And the fact is that you can't. This drives the self-esteem people crazy. And the reason you can't is, how are you going to do it? Affirmation, I'm brave, I'm brave. Experiences, well, the experiences prove that, underlying your real belief because you're trying to prove something. And the other thing is, it's not like you live in Omaha because you do, which is factual. There's no actual way to define a human being.
right.
So you're in a very um,
It's subjective.
undefinable area to begin with, you know. Now, it's I make the distinction between what I describe as the belief business and the creating business. And in the belief business, it matters what you believe. And the major activity in the belief business is conversion. You know, believe the right things and things will turn out. If you don't believe the right things, you know, you go to hell in a handbasket.
Right.
In the creating business, it actually doesn't matter what you believe. It matters how well you create. Now, the proof of that is masters of the creative process have believed all kinds of things. It didn't matter what they believed, it mattered how well they create. It's a little like it doesn't matter what you believe to learn how to drive a car.
Right. That's just a skill.
Yeah. And creative process is the most successful process for accomplishment in history. It's created all of the arts, science, commerce. I mean, it's really the human spirit is very closely aligned with creating. We want to bring things into being.
So can I just bring you back a little bit because you had said that there were four different concepts that have been kind of identified, and you kind of went
Mhm.
into in depth into the first one, which is, in my opinion, kind of the biggest one. But the
Yeah.
other three are probably important too to just kind
Well,
of
if they're yours, they're very important.
right.
Okay, so I'll name the other three quickly, but then I want to say something about each one. The other three are purpose and existence, um, freedom and control, which is a really tough issue for people, and parental preoccupation. Purpose and existence is, you know, the famous Viktor Frankl book, Man's Search for Meaning,
Hmm.
which I found out recently was mistranslated. The title is not in German, is not Search for Meaning.
It isn't. What is
It's
it?
a different title. I forget, but it wasn't, it was really interesting to find this out. My point about that was if you have to search for purpose, you don't have one. If you had a real purpose, life purpose, you know it. Mozart never thought he was going to be anything but a composer.
You mean a purpose given to you, right?
Well, a search for purpose, trying to find a purpose that's your purpose.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't create purposes. In fact, that's the one thing about Frankl's book that does really, you know, he's not actually talking about searching for purpose. He's talking about creating a purpose. And creating purposes, you can create many purposes in your life. But this search for what am I supposed to do in life? As if somehow it was when you were born, you got a contract that you're supposed to find and live up to. Well, for most people, they don't really have a purpose in life. They can create purposes based on their interests or their involvements. Um, or they might not have any particular purpose that they care about, and that's okay too. Um, and so here's the thing about purpose and existence. People who have this concept feel like they have to justify their existence, usually by good deeds. So for here's the telltale sign of that one. You go to bed at night and you start to think about all the good things you did that day that justified your existence. And if you had done enough, great. But if you didn't do enough, you start to worry.
So my question would be, do you ever feel like you've done enough, or if you have that concept going on, or do you always feel like you
Well,
need to do more?
you might have it for a day, but it won't last, you know. But the point is you cannot justify your existence. The fact is you exist, period.
Right,
You know, you don't have to earn the right to be here. It's a gift. You're here.
right,
But, you know, again, we've been told all our lives that we have to live up to some noble purpose and make our lives worth something. And what's life about if it's not about some purpose? And to me, it's a little different. It's like winning the lottery. You know, you get to be alive. And what a great trip that is. And in that life, we have good times and bad times. We have the full involvement of humanity and all the experiences we have as human beings, but it also is the opportunity to create.
Right.
Um, the freedom and control has these qualities. Um, it has a conceptual notion of danger. The world's a dangerous place. Now, this is different than risk assessment. Real risk assessment will tell you it's okay to park your car here, but not over there.
Right.
This is a generalized notion of the world's a dangerous place. And so, in order to protect both yourself, but also your loved ones, you set up rules and regulations, you set up a control strategy to try to prevent people from danger. This is not like being a power hungry dictator. It's like protecting people from um, harm or potential harm that they don't seem to see. And so, with this kind of thing, you'll see a lot of people very conflict driven.
Well, it creates a
And
lot of worry, I would bet, anxiety, that sort
yeah,
of worldview.
yeah. And the worry is about what might happen in the future. It's not about what's going on right now.
What
So
if?
you get a lot of reaction and response to circumstances that haven't happened and probably won't.
So how does all of this apply when we talk about not just a personal life, but an organization or a team that are trying to accomplish things? I mean, I assume some of these concepts are not really in play there. It's a different environment entirely.
Well, let's talk about that in a minute because that's a different kind of structure. The last one is parental preoccupation. And some people have this, and it's a little bit like an obsession about your parents finally saying to you, son or daughter, I was wrong. You were right. And the thing about it is often these things are unresolved events from the past that are never going to be resolved.
Right.
And the way you resolve the unresolvable is to leave it unresolved.
Accept it as being unresolved.
No, recognize it. It's not accept is sort of
Recognize.
like kind of trying to convince yourself.
Right.
See that in fact it's unresolved. You're never going to catch the plane you missed.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so let me say something about organizations now, because certainly some of my work and some of my books have been very instrumental in various organizations around the world. Organizational structures have often to do, when they don't work well, with conflicts of interest within the organization, unclear goals, fragmentation, things not fitting together, people giving contradictory purposes. And so organizational structure um, really needs a number of things. One is leadership, really powerful leadership. It can't be a grassroots movement. It has to really be leader driven, leader led. But then we have to know certain things, like if it's a commercial organization, we would look at what's the offer, who are the customers, what do they want, what do we want, what's the match. And the key to great business strategy is to make a match that people can't refuse, and not in the Godfather sense,
Right.
but that it's so good you really want it. And then the other ways that we would look at business structure and strategy is, how do they know about the match and how do they get the match, which is distribution, and
Hmm.
how the current market is and is changing. And so those are the components of organizational structure, and then how people work together. One of the ways I've described this is, you have a team of, let's say, senior executives, and they're not getting along well. And so HR sends them on a whitewater rafting trip for team building. And so the folks go out in the woods and they go on the whitewater rafting trip for a week, and they camp and they fall in love with each other and they really gel as a group. and then you put them back in the structure they came from. And 6 months later, it's as if it never happened. And what it proves is those people, those very same people, can work really well in a good structure and not work well in a bad structure.
It's not about them.
Totally not about them. In fact, often an experience that people have in um, organizations is someone's not working well, and you try to do everything you can to improve their performance, but it doesn't work, and you have to replace them. And the person who replaces them, often 6 months later, is functioning exactly like the person they replaced.
Right.
Now, when that happens, what you know is that it's not the individual, it's the structure of the position. And think about it this way. Everything we say about human motivation could be different. We have a new person's got different DNA, different astrology, different
Right.
cultural background, perhaps, different age group, different educational background, different Myers-Briggs
Whatever.
rating or
Yeah.
whatever, and you put them in a particular position and they'll function exactly as the position predicts.
I have seen this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the opposite, by the way, is also true. If you structure it well, whoever's coming into that position, no matter what their background, as long as they're competent, will exceed in their performance versus be limited in their performance.
So it's possible to structure things really for success in that way.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some questions if you don't mind jumping
Oh,
in
great.
some of
Yeah.
that a little bit. So I'm gonna one person asked two questions, so I'm just gonna go ahead and read both those questions and then you can answer those and then we'll go into the other ones. So does this mean that we should at least do structural consulting to see the underlying structure? Is there a strategy for how to identify it? And the same person is asking, can you please elaborate more on freedom and control examples and how setting the rules to protect themselves?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's sort of clear.
Okay. Yeah. No, you don't need to do structural consulting in order to have a change of underlying structure. I get email all the time telling me that people have read my books and from that have had changes of underlying structure. People who have done our courses have had changes of underlying structure. Certainly, all of the courses that we have developed have that in mind, that they move from a structure that's not workable to a structure that is workable. So that's important. The second question about um, freedom and control.
Right,
Um, it's often, and it is something that's fairly a new discovery on my part, that a lot of times people who have that concept that the world's dangerous have had some experience early in their life that the world is dangerous. In one case, he saw his brother get killed. In another case, the house was threatened and almost burnt down, and things like that. In one case, the woman grew up and her father was the town sheriff and they had a jail in her house, you know.
oh, gee.
And so what was interesting, well, there's a point I want to make about this. It's about how these concepts come about. How do people end up with concepts? And in traditional psychology or psychotherapy, the notion is you've had a traumatic experience when you were young and you have to relive and release it to be able to move on. In our experience, that's not the case for the most part. Sometimes it is, most often it's not. What is the case is people come to certain conclusions about themselves or about the world, and that then becomes the concept. So let's say that as a little girl, her father leaves the house, and now that's a really bad experience for her. But that experience will be over at a certain point as she grows up. What's not necessarily over is that she came to the conclusion you can't trust men.
Right,
So now she's an adult, and there's two things she wants. One is she wants a relationship, and the other is, but you can't trust them. So imagine now the two rubber bands, and here she is in this relationship. And the whole time in the back of her mind is, especially if he's a good guy, When is the other shoe going to fall? You can't trust him.
Right. Always looking for that to happen
Yeah. And
and waiting
testing
for it.
him. There'll be a lot of tests and so
Yeah.
on. And also sometimes this kind of structure, in this kind of structure, the person will choose people you can't trust. So, it's just a
And that
double
just
whammy.
reinforces it for them, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
But
can
the point is that all concepts are not real. That's why you have a concept. You don't have a concept about the color of your eyes or how old you are. And
right,
so, if I describe again structural tension, end result, current reality, there's no room for concepts of any kind. Here's what I want. Here's where I am. There's no concept there.
right.
And the
So
question of
let's
what do I have to do to move from here to there, and maybe I have to learn things or I have to get other people involved or whatever, but there's no concept involved.
that kind of leads back to that. The first question that she asked was, how to see the underlying structure, and really, the answer to that is also that you don't have to go on a search and destroy mission for your underlying structure. You can change it without fully understanding what it is, right? If you
Right.
just set up the advancing structure, then it will lend itself to you not falling back into whatever your non-advancing structure is.
Yeah, but that's easier said than done,
Absolutely.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
I wish it were as easy as, oh, all I have to do.
Yeah.
But listen, that's why we really have trainings and books, and this is not something, some ideas take getting used to, and you've got to spend some time with them.
Right.
But it's not a whole lot of time, and it's not like getting a master's degree in physics. But it is physics, what we're talking about. Structure is physics.
Yeah, the idea of equilibrium and being able to do that that you're setting up a tension that wants to resolve itself is a physics idea, is a physics
That's right. Yeah, the
description.
principle is that equilibrium is the goal of the physical world. And anytime you have a state of non-equilibrium, it'll strive for equilibrium. And that's neither
Right.
a good or bad thing, but it is a force in play. So when I create structural tension, I'm creating deliberately a state of non-equilibrium. It's like stretching the bow of the arrow and aiming the arrow. That's setting up a tension that strives for resolution. Here it is, the desired state is different from the actual state. When I've created it, the actual state and the desired state are the same or equal.
Do you know what wind is?
Do I know what wind is? No.
Yeah. Wind is the atmosphere trying to equalize itself. So if there's a higher and a lower pressure area, then wind is literally
Oh,
the
really?
air moving to equalize the where it's low pressure.
I thought it was trees going back and forth. Just a joke.
Yeah. All right. So along these lines, there's another question. Can you talk about I think they mean the fundamental choice of being the predominant creative force in your life. This is a lesson that we teach in the Creating Your Life course, and it's also pretty key to all of these principles. So just
Yeah, let me begin by saying what a fundamental choice is. Fundamental choice is a choice about a state of being. So if you try to quit smoking, but you've never made the fundamental choice to be a non-smoker, there's a good chance you'll quit and then restart and quit and restart. If you've made the fundamental choice to be a non-smoker, then just about anything you choose will help because you've made that fundamental choice. Now, the fundamental choice, and there are four that we recommend. Um, the fundamental choice to be the predominant creative force in your own life does not mean being the fundamental creative force in the universe.
right. It's just your life.
Yeah, just your life. And it does mean a kind of, I hate to use this term because it's been so misused in the self-help world, but it really is taking responsibility for your own life, that you're not a victim of circumstances. We have circumstances, you may have limitations, but the question is, no matter what the limitations are, what is it you want to create? Where are you in what might you do? And um, that when you become the predominant creative force in your life, you're no longer looking at the circumstances as hoping that someday, they will turn out all right. You're also not seeing yourself as a problem to solve. Now, in our
That's
society,
tough.
well, in our society, the notion is if you're a problem to solve, and once you solve your problems, you'll be okay. And here's the thing about problem solving. I mean, problem solving is different than creating. You can solve all of your problems and still not have what you want. Problem solving is you're taking action to have something go away, the problem. Creating, you're taking action to have something come into being, the creation.
Right.
And so they're not really the same thing. So the fundamental choice to be the predominant creative force in your own life puts you in a position of creating your life in some optimal way. Now, optimal means the best it can be for you. It doesn't mean optimal for everyone else, but it
Right.
doesn't. In fact, there are possibilities for you, and in fact, you can spend time really exploring those possibilities, and if you want them to pursue creating them.
So,
The other, by the way, the other fundamental choices that we recommend is the choice to be healthy. If you've made the fundamental choice to be healthy, it really drives a number of other choices, diet, exercise, healthcare, however you um, tests that you might do and all of that kind of stuff. The fundamental choice to be true to yourself, which means being true to your values.
mhm,
Doesn't mean true to your whims.
right.
And also the fundamental choice to be free.
So there was actually a question about that. What can you expand on what it means to make the choice to be free, that fundamental choice?
I'll try. I'm not quite so sure I can accomplish it.
All right, give it a shot.
But okay. But in my life, I have organized my life for the entire time I have been an adult um, to have artistic freedom. So I can do what I want, create what I want, live the way I want, to be free to think what I want, say what I want. And
What does it look
so
like if you
it's hard
haven't
to
made?
describe because for me, it's such a personal thing, but it might be very different for someone else what freedom means. It's not freedom from, it's freedom to.
Freedom too.
Yeah.
All right. So there's a few other questions here. Uh, so there's some questions about continuing engagement. We'll get to that near the end. We've got a few things to just share with you all about kind of different ways that you can continue to think about this after this webinar. Here's a question. So the way to see the structure is essentially to tell the truth, really, since
Yeah.
telling the truth about what's going on, correct? To be truthful to
You,
yourself,
you
really.
never want to be in a position of lying to yourself.
Right.
You might not tell everybody else what you think. That's a personal matter, but you never want to be in a position of lying to yourself ever.
Yeah. It's hard to make choices that are going to be aligned with what you want if you're not really being true to yourself to begin with,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Well, that means, but there's another thing here. See, if I say this to a person who has an identity issue, they would see it subjectively versus objectively. Subjective is how it feels.
mhm.
Objective is what it is. So we say, what is the truth? The truth is not how you feel. The truth is what it is, independent of how you happen to feel.
Right. And the
So
truth
there's this kind
includes how
of,
you think about things.
and it's not only are you being honest, you're making a point of seeing it honestly.
Right.
Yeah.
And that can be hard, especially if it's a painful reality for yourself to admit.
And that's why
Right.
to move from a subjective to an objective point of view is really helpful.
Right. So along those lines, someone else asked, so what does it look like when somebody's orientation transforms from being oscillating into advancing? And what does it look like? Does it stay that way? And what does it look
Yeah.
like when it does?
Yeah. And by the way, again, I think at this point there's 22 sessions of structural consulting on our structural consulting channel. And I invite people to see those because, in fact, can I tell you why I created the channel?
Yeah, go ahead. It's on
So one
YouTube,
day
by
I'm
the way.
one day I'm going through the TV stations and I come across um, um, what's his name, Dr. Phil,
Oh, yeah.
and he is just so terrible. And I thought, God, and I thought, well, nobody has actually seen structural consulting. So I decided to start doing structural consultations that were designed for the public to be able to see entire structural consultations in which you see the patterns and you see the way I work with people and you see a change of underlying structure for each of those um, clients in these sessions. So that's why I created the channel.
Well, I just want to just reiterate that for anyone who's interested in this, watching those sessions is really fascinating. It's a type of consulting that's based on the structural
Hmm.
approach that gets really to the heart of how people are operating so quickly. And I don't have the link available at the moment, but you can Google quickly for Robert Fritz Structural Consulting
Consulting
Channel.
channel, right?
And it'll pop right up. There's 20 some odd sessions, and each
And
one's
there's
about
other things on the channel too that are dealing with structure one way or another.
right.
The question about though was how does it feel when there's a change of underlying structure? And if you look at those sessions, most people say a similar report. They say they feel free. They feel like a weight's been lifted off their shoulders. They feel disoriented also because where they were standing, they no longer, feel the ground. That doesn't last. They become oriented later. Now, for years, we wondered why is it that people feel like there's been a weight lifted off their shoulders? And working with Dr. Wayne Anderson, um, he described to us what was going on. And what it was is they're moving from chronic stress to the absence of chronic stress. Chronic stress, real stress is, you see a saber-toothed tiger in the jungle and you run
And
away, and in about an hour, the adrenaline should go back to normal. It doesn't last. Chronic stress is it doesn't go away. And look, here's this creates the stress. There's a way I'm supposed to be, but I can't be that way. And so what we discovered was when a person has a change of underlying structure, chronic stress often immediately goes away. It's a phenomenal thing. And chronic stress is very unhealthy
it's
too.
also too, when you're shifting from one to the other, there's not in my experience anyway, there's not a period in which you suddenly only are operating in an advancing structure. You have to really retrain your mind a little bit to recognize when your patterns are, when you're kind of slipping into an oscillating pattern or one that isn't going to advance you, and then bring yourself back. Make sure that you're thinking
Sometimes,
through
but
it.
but in our experience, most often it's more like the secret is now known, and you can't not know it anymore.
That's true, but you still
Yeah,
have habits
yeah.
of thinking that you have to kind of get used to not, falling into.
Well, but see, if you add that to the creative process, that way you have now something to create because people want things in their lives. They
So
they want
it
wonderful
directs
things
your
in their lives.
focus. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Okay. So we're getting close to the end here, so I just want to make sure I catch all of these questions that are people posted. If you can look at the questions in the Q&A, people have posted the link for the structural consulting channel. I thank you all for doing that.
Hmm.
Sorry, I'm just scanning through your questions here to make sure that we got everything. How can we watch them? Where are they? That's sooner. Okay.
By the way, while you're doing that, just to tell people, I have another channel called Robert Fritz Creating Channel, and in that channel, there's a lot of the films I've made, and a lot of great stuff is on that channel. That's more of for your entertainment. Uh,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm just going to move into the engagement part here because there's multiple different ways that if if you're not used to this work or if you haven't yet engaged with us, we can get to. Oh, there's one quick question here we can probably get to. Can you speak a little to structure and the momentum as it relates to the job search and other choices that involve a lot of delay and related issues? I want to remain in the creative orientation, but it's difficult when people don't respond or take a while. Well, I understand that.
Yeah. Well, you're offering yourself for services, and um, the best way you can prepare yourself is to be good at your job and over time have a track record and so on and so on. I don't have any particular, I mean, it's good if you're holding structural tension, but it's not magic. This will motivate is looking for the right match between your skills and abilities and talents to the right position and so on. And and I'm would think that career counseling too wouldn't be such a bad idea if it's good career counseling.
But it also has to do with, I mean, when you're looking for a job or any kind of professional thing, it's a professional relationship that you're trying
Hmm.
to start, right?
Yeah,
And relationships require two people to say yes, at least.
that's
And
right.
so it's a little harder because you are not in full control of both sides of that relationship. And if you were,
Yeah.
it would be a lot easier. So, I would say that it can be tough, if you're not finding that in your job search that you're getting results and answers, then you might want to try different approaches, to do the same thing.
Or
It's a
expand
terrible
your
question.
career
Abilities.
abilities
Right.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
There's other ways of going about it. And also I would say defining what it is that you want out of your career or out of your life in general will help you really focus what that job search is going to look like.
exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to just share quickly. This is a list of important books. It's not a comprehensive list, but it is a list of books by Robert, The Path of Least Resistance, Creating, Your Life is Art, Identity. All of these are really excellent reads, and they're all available from robertfritz.com.
Well, actually, I think they're all available on Amazon, and two of those books are also audiobooks on Audible. So, The Path of Least Resistance and Creating are both Audible
Okay,
books as well.
I think you can find links to them all from your site,
Yeah,
however.
and I think they're all Kindle books too.
Okay. So other further engagement opportunities, if you're interested on a personal level, we have the Creating Your Life course. It's an online course. It's self-study. There's monthly live check-ins. In fact, there's one this Sunday. The live check-ins are a conversation with Robert. So sort of like this, but with all of your fellow students from around the world. Um,
I do want to say about that course, you have a lesson every day, so it's 3 months, but every day you're doing a very short lesson in the morning and putting it into practice during the day. And it creates a tremendous amount of momentum.
It creates momentum and it also creates structure around your life. I know that there's
Mm.
many people in this webinar even have taken it and can attest to that. But anyway, so it's a really great way of also starting out if you haven't done an in-person or are not able to do something in person. It's a great way to engage. But being in person is also a very exciting way to experience this work. In Australia, Robert will be there in March. We will be there as well as Creator Tools. Three different workshops. Path of Least Resistance. You want to say anything about, you want to just give a quick intro to these three workshops?
Yeah, there's a videotape on the structure Robert Fritz Structural Consulting channel that describes them. Path of Least Resistance is a personal transformational workshop based on my book. The Art of the Creative Process is for artists, and it looks at the structural approach toward arts. And Fundamentals of Structural Thinking is the foundational, it's our flagship course in the way of learning how to think structurally, and it's primarily for consultants and coaches and people in the helping professions and managers.
They're all excellent. And then of course there's a Living Art in Mexico that's coming up in let's see, the end of March, beginning of April. That's led by Katerina and Ira, two of our associates. They're having an online Q&A session on January 31st. If you're interested in joining that session, just email them at the Living Art email that you see at the bottom there at
And
robertfritz.com.
there's also a video about that course on Robert Fritz Structural Consulting channel. And this is a fantastic course. It's an unbelievable deep end of the pool week of creating and structural dynamics.
It's super fun too.
Yeah, it's really it's a gas.
And then there's also a Fundamentals of Structural Thinking. That's the FST introductory or the flagship course. That's available online. So if you aren't able to travel to Australia and experience it in person, there is a virtual version that's happening in April. That's a bunch of different ways that you can engage in this work after this webinar, and we hope that you follow up with that. And just as we are now hitting the hour, I want to thank you, Robert, for giving us your time and your expertise.
Pleasure.
And I want to thank you all for attending. This has been really interesting, and there will be a replay available, and we'll let you all know about it when it's up. So
And
thank
thank
you.
you, Ivan. It's been great chatting with you.
Yeah, likewise. All right. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.